Aziokova had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine. The cracked ceiling above her apartment didn't bother her anymore. The peeling paint in the hallway didn't either. She had grown used to the hum of the fridge that sounded like it was coughing its last breath. But that morning felt heavier. She sat at the tiny wooden table near the window and poured the contents of her pocket onto it. 3/4, 2 dimes, 5 pennies. $1. She stared at it like it was an accusation. Her phone lit up. Landlord, I need an answer by Friday. Another notification followed. Mother, doctor says surgery shouldn't wait. Azio pressed her lips together and inhaled slowly. Today was her interview at a mid-sized creative agency called Caldora and Finch. If she got it, she could finally stop juggling freelance gigs and cafe shifts. She could finally help her mother without calculating every expense. She picked up the dollar and slid the coins into her coat pocket. That's bus fare, she told herself. She didn't know it would become something else entirely. The city was still stretching awake when Aziel turned the corner onto Alder Street. Where Morning Ember is. It wasn't a trendy chain cafe. It was small. Narrow windows fogged from inside heat. Warm amber lights hung low from black metal fixtures. The scent of roasted beans drifted onto the sidewalk like an invitation. Outside the cafe, near the brick wall just to the right of the entrance, where the warmth from inside barely reached, sat a man. Not inside. Not at a table. Not even under the awning. He was positioned just far enough from the door to avoid blocking customers, but close enough to feel the warmth when it opened. That detail mattered, because it told her something about him. He didn't want to inconvenience anyone. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't asking. His coat was worn at the sleeves. His shoes were scuffed but once expensive. His posture wasn't defeated, just tired. Aziel slowed down. He looked up, and their eyes met. I wasn't supposed to feel anything that day. That was the point. Every year, I step away from the glass buildings and the controlled rooms. I sit where no one knows me. No tailored suits. No drivers. No titles. Just pavement. The first year I did it, someone spat near my shoe. The second year, a group of college boys took photos and laughed. The third year, a woman offered help, but when my team later reached out anonymously with assistance, she tried to negotiate future returns. People don't see you. They see opportunity. Or inconvenience. That morning outside Morning Ember, I was just trying to remember what normal felt like. Then she stopped. She didn't look at me like I was a problem. She looked at me like I was a person. What's your name? She asked. No one ever asks that. Mailer, I answered. She smiled. Aziel. She didn't rush away. She didn't tighten her grip on her bag. She studied my hands, probably noticing they were shaking from the cold. Have you eaten? She asked. I almost said yes to spare her the trouble, because she looked like she needed help herself. But something I just had to follow through with my experiment. Not today. She stepped inside the cafe. I assumed she'd get something for herself. She came back with a small black coffee. For you. I knew what that cost. I saw the way she counted coins through the window. You didn't have to, I said. I know. He stared at the cup like it was fragile glass. You look like you needed it more, she added quietly. He studied her face carefully. You gave me your last money. It wasn't a question. Her heart skipped. How would you know that? He didn't answer. Instead he asked, why? She shrugged. My mother always said kindness isn't measured by what you have left. He held the cup tightly. You have an interview, he said. She stiffened. How did you? You're dressed like someone hoping today changes everything. Her eyes filled unexpectedly. I hope so. You'll get it. She laughed softly. You don't even know me. Mailer's voice lowered. I have lived long enough to know it when I see it. They sat there for 15 minutes. I didn't tell her I was wealthy. I didn't tell her who I really was. What do you do? I asked her. Design, she said, brushing hair from her face. Well, trying to. What kind? I like branding. Logos. Visual identity. I like when something simple can say something honest. Honest? I repeated. Yeah. Like when a design doesn't try too hard to impress you. It just feels right. I swallowed. That's rare. She laughed softly. Most clients don't think so. What would you design for yourself? I asked. She thought about it. A small studio. Warm light. Plants. People who feel safe there. Safe. That word echoed in me. When was the last time I felt safe in a conversation? Not impressive. Not powerful. Safe. She asked me what I used to want to be. No one asks a billionaire that. I wanted to build things, I admitted. Like what? Systems. Bridges. Solutions. She nodded. You look like someone who builds. That sentence felt strangely intimate. I listened, truly listened, because it was an honest conversation I have not had in a while. When she stood to leave, she felt oddly lighter. Good luck, Aziel, I said. She turned back. Stay warm, Mailer. She didn't see the black car parked across the street. She didn't see the suited man inside watching closely. She didn't know this moment had been carefully orchestrated, but not the way people think. After she left for her interview, my security detail, stationed discreetly across the street, approached. Sir, are you all right? Yes. We ran a basic scan on the woman. Standard precaution. I stiffened. I don't like digging into people without cause. But they had already done it. She's late on rent, my head of security said quietly. Mother has pending surgery. I noticed she walked instead of taking the bus. I stared at the coffee in my hand. I think she gave you her last dollar, he added. I felt something shift in my chest. For the first time in years, someone had interacted with me without knowing my net worth. Without wanting a meeting. Without pitching an idea. Without trying to attach themselves to my success. She didn't ask what I did. She asked what I liked. And that's what stayed with me. Aziel arrived late. She'd walked instead of taking the bus. Her shoes were damp from crossing puddles. Inside Caldora and Finch, sleek furniture gleamed. People moved with confidence. She felt small. The interviewer, a woman named Dravina Sol, scanned her resume. You've worked mainly freelance? Yes. And bookstore cafe? Yes. Dravina raised an eyebrow. That's not agency experience. Aziel swallowed. No. But my portfolio. We're looking for someone more polished. The word hit harder than it should have. Polished. Like her hunger showed. Like her struggle was visible. The interview ended in under 15 minutes. By the time Aziel stepped outside, her hope had thinned into something brittle. She walked home slowly. The cafe sidewalk was empty now. Mailer was gone. 4 reasons she couldn't explain, that disappointed her more than the rejection. People assume wealth solves isolation. It amplifies it. My old friends? They stopped calling after my first major acquisition. Not because they hated me, but because they didn't know how to relate anymore. At gatherings, conversations shifted when I entered. Some people performed around me. Others pitched ideas disguised as friendship. Romantic relationships. They either wanted status or feared my schedule. No one talked to me about anything. Aziel talked about colors. About her mother's stubborn cooking habits. About how she once redesigned a bakery logo for free because she liked the owner's smile. She didn't orbit my money. She existed in her own gravity. That felt like home. The next morning I didn't send flowers. I sent recognition. $50,000 not life-changing for me, but it could stabilize her. And a handwritten note. You gave me your last dollar knowing you might need it more. I did not ask for help. You offered it anyway. This is not repayment. It is recognition. Mailer. Her vision blurred. Her knees trembled. This isn't real, she whispered. It is, the woman replied calmly. Mr. Viral insists. Viral? The name hit like thunder. She searched it immediately. Headlines. Magazine covers. Philanthropy events. Corporate acquisitions. The man she bought coffee for wasn't broke. He was powerful. Inside the envelope something else slipped out. A velvet box. She opened it with shaking hands. A ring. Simple. Elegant. Not flashy. Another note beneath it. Kindness is rare. Partnership is rarer. If you would like to see where honesty might lead us, have dinner with me. Her heart pounded. Was she angry? Confused? Flattered? All of it. And the ring? That wasn't a proposal. It was symbolic. A gesture that said, I see long-term where you see struggle. When she came to dinner, she didn't look impressed. She looked conflicted. You made me feel small, she said honestly. I'm sorry. You could have told me. If I had, I replied, you wouldn't have been you. That was the truth. If she had known my name, she might have hesitated. And I didn't want hesitation. I wanted authenticity. We didn't rush. We walked through parks. We talked about failure. She told me how rejection emails feel like quiet heartbreak. I told her how success can feel hollow. One night, she said something that shattered me. I don't want your world, she said gently. I want you. No one had separated those two before. Most people saw them as the same thing. I wasn't used to being wanted for myself. And that made me want her even more. Months later, we returned to Morning Ember. The brick wall. The amber lights. The same spot where I had sat. This time we sat together. I hated those experiments sometimes, I admitted. Why? Because when people found out who I was, they changed. And me? You didn't. She smiled softly. I still think your coat was ugly. I laughed, genuinely laughed. That sound surprised me. You made me feel normal, I told her. You are normal. No, I said quietly. I forgot how. I reached into my coat. The ring again. This time it wasn't possibility. It was certainty. I don't want someone who needs me, I said. I want someone who chooses me. She held my hands. I choose you. On our wedding day there were no flashing headlines. Just warmth. Just family. Just intention. As she walked toward me I thought about that dollar. How easy it would have been for her to keep walking. How ordinary that morning could have remained. People say I left a $50,000 tip. But the truth? She tipped me first. With dignity, with humanity, with conversation that didn't revolve around transactions. She reminded me that before I was an empire, I was a man. And sometimes the richest thing you can find is someone who talks to you like you're worth more than your balance sheet. 5 years later, Alder Street still smelled like roasted coffee in the mornings. Morning Ember hadn't changed much. The amber lights still glowed against the fogged windows. The brick wall still held the memory of cold mornings. The small sidewalk tables were still slightly uneven. But one thing had changed. Across the street stood a modest, beautifully renovated brick building with a soft gold sign. Ember and Kova, Creative Studio. The font was simple, honest, warm. Exactly how she described it that day. Inside, sunlight poured through tall industrial windows. Plants lined the shelves. Designers moved comfortably through the open space. Laughter floated between workstations. No glass towers. No intimidating marble floors. Just intention. Aziel stood in the center of it all, holding a ribbon between her fingers. She looked different now, not richer in appearance but steadier. Confident. Grounded. Behind her stood Mailer, hands in his pockets, watching her the same way he had watched her walk away that first morning. Not possessive. Proud. When the $50,000 first landed in her account, Aziel could have upgraded everything. Moved apartments. Bought luxury. Quit working immediately. She didn't. She paid for her mother's surgery first. She cleared her rent. Then she sat with the rest of it. What do you want? Mailer had asked her gently. She had thought about that for days. I want what I described, she said finally. A space where small businesses can afford real design. Where no one feels too small to belong. He didn't offer to fund it outright. He asked instead, what do you need to build it yourself? That question meant more than any check. So she created a plan. Started with her own savings and Mailer invested. Not as a savior, but as a loving husband and a partner. With contracts. With boundaries. With respect. And that made all the difference. Now, standing in front of her studio, ribbon in hand, Aziel spotted a familiar sight. Near Morning Ember's brick wall sat a young man. Thin jacket. Careful posture. Not begging. Just existing. Her heart tightened. She walked across the street. Mailer noticed immediately. He followed quietly but stopped a few feet behind her. Hey, she said softly to the young man. Have you eaten today? The young man hesitated. Not really. She smiled gently. Stay here. She stepped into Morning Ember. Mailer watched her through the window. He remembered. The coins. The trembling hands. The quiet dignity. She came back with coffee. And a sandwich this time. For you, she said. The young man blinked, surprised. You don't have to. I know. Mailer felt his throat tighten. The young man looked between them. Why are you being nice? Aziel answered without hesitation. Because someone once was. She didn't tell him about the check. She didn't tell him about the ring. She didn't tell him about the empire behind her. She just sat beside him on the cold brick edge. And talked. About work. About what he liked. About what he wanted to be before life got heavy. Mailer stayed back. He didn't interrupt. He didn't turn it into a spectacle. He just watched the woman he loved do what she had always done. Choose kindness when it wasn't required. People think the most rewarding part of success is recognition. It isn't. It's watching the person you love remain who they were before the world shifted. That day outside the cafe, I had wondered if she was rare. Years later, I knew she was consistent. She hadn't changed because money arrived. She hadn't grown arrogant because doors opened. She still noticed the overlooked. She still asked for names. She still believed dignity mattered. And because of that, so did I. Back at the studio entrance, friends, family, and local business owners gathered. Aziel's mother stood near the front, healthy now, smiling in a way that once seemed impossible. Mailer stepped beside Aziel. "You ready?" he asked softly. She exhaled. "Yeah." She cut the ribbon. Applause filled the air. But Aziel's eyes drifted across the street for just a moment, to the brick wall where everything had begun. Mailer noticed. "Best investment I ever made," he murmured. She glanced at him. "The studio?" He shook his head. "The coffee." She laughed softly, emotion rising in her eyes. "That wasn't an investment." "No," he agreed. "It was love. Before either of us knew it." Here's what the headlines would have said. "Billionaire leaves $50,000 tip and marries woman who helped him." But that's not the real story. The real story is this. A struggling woman refused to let fear make her smaller. A wealthy man realized he didn't want admiration. He wanted connection. Old friendships had faded because of imbalance. Past relationships had cracked under expectation. People had seen him as leverage, opportunity, advantage. But she saw a man sitting on cold pavement, and treated him like one. That's why it lasted. Not because of the money. Because of the equality. That evening, when the crowd dispersed and the studio lights dimmed, they walked back to Morning Ember. The owner recognized them now. "Your usual?" she asked warmly. Mailer smiled. "2 coffees." They sat at the same brick edge. This time it wasn't cold. The air felt gentle. "You ever think about what would have happened if I kept walking?" Aziel asked. "Every year," he admitted. She slipped her hand into his. "I'm glad I didn't." "So am I." He looked around, at the cafe lights, at the street that once felt lonely. "I used to think success meant being above everything," he said quietly. "And now? Now I think it means sitting beside someone." She leaned her head against his shoulder. And since he met Aziel, he stopped feeling like a billionaire. He stopped feeling like a headline. He stopped feeling like an empire. He felt like a man who had been seen. The real reward wasn't the $50,000. It wasn't the ring. It wasn't even the studio. It was this. 2 people who met at their lowest, and built something higher than either of them could alone. Because sometimes the most life-changing decision you make is how you treat someone when you think it doesn't matter. And sometimes, your last dollar isn't the end of your story. It's the first page.